We have a constitution, the Japan's constitution, which never been amended since the launch.
This is going to be a problem that I know the government's already thinking about. What happens with electric vehicles?
There has been a very successful campaign launched by the left, which vilifies people who are anti-illegal immigration.
Welcome once again to the Aussie Wire. Today we're speaking with David Limbrick MLC about fuel excise and the cost of living, with our North America correspondent Julie Hartman about what's happening on the southern border of the US, and introducing Yuki Oikawa, our new Japan correspondent, who brings us up to date on the battle for freedom from government oppression in the land of the rising sun. But first, I want to give a huge shout out to our friends at Rebel News because they've sent a team of reporters to Davos to cover the World Economic Forum event there, which is in its second of 3 days right now. The World Economic Forum say that this year is about rebuilding trust, but what they don't mention, of course, is that their members and the policies that they have promoted in the past are the reason why trust has been broken in the first place. The World Economic Forum is not some benign get-together of the world's rich and powerful. It is a psychopathic anti-human death cult led by Klaus Schwab, who believes that he both can and should tell the rest of the world how they can live. But death cults aren't new. What makes this one so dangerous? Well, because unlike Jim Jones and his Kool-Aid drinking suicidal followers, the WEF dream of your death. Their death cult is a your death cult, not theirs. They believe the world is overpopulated, over-consuming resources, and that the only solution is to take a hardline, anti-human stance, controlling everyone's every move, and using a combination of drugs and technology as the new opiate of the masses, so that we all live small and meaningless lives while they swan around the world as a new permanent ruling class. And no, none of that is an exaggeration. You will find all of that in Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, and in the speeches given at the last 19 annual gatherings in Davos. This is what they talk about in public. But most of the Davos event is not public. The real business is done behind closed doors, and delegates from all over the world, including heads of state, simply emerge from these closed-door meetings with policies that they take back to their respective home countries and ram through. Democracy and the rule of law be damned. Don't believe me? Consider that across the Western world right now, country after country is trying to implement speech controls in the name of misinformation and disinformation. The push for speech controls didn't come from the public. We aren't seeing massive protests with thousands of people on the streets demanding the government control what they can say. It didn't come from the bottom up, it's coming from the top down. And it's no coincidence that the World Economic Forum has done research and claimed that misinformation and disinformation is the number one problem in the world right now. Who says that? Number one? More than the cost of living? More than the failing social healthcare systems right across the Commonwealth? More than the looming threat of a slowly spreading war driven by the bottom lines of the big US defense contractors? Misinformation and disinformation is number one? That didn't come from us. That's coming from them. Because they are afraid of our freedom of speech. They are afraid of what we might say. And they're afraid even of the questions we might ask. Don't believe me? Head over to Rebel News. The link will be in the description. They are at Davos. Have a look at the lengths that these people will go to avoid being asked simple questions. Ezra Levant from Rebel News talked about exactly this in a video about his trip to Davos a few weeks ago with Glenn Beck of The Blaze. Check it out.
So the theme this year is rebuilding trust. Yeah. What trust have they lost? And I mean this or are they trying to rebuild? The trust among themselves, the trust that they thought they had with the people? What are they rebuilding?
I think they mean trust in all institutions.
Yes.
And because, first of all, who the heck is the World Economic Forum? And why, and who made them God? Mm-hmm. It's a privately owned corporation. Klaus Schwab started the thing. You have to buy your way in, as I mentioned. Larry Fink of BlackRock is a senior poobah. Justin Trudeau's deputy, the one who had our reporter arrested, she's on the board of the World Economic Forum.
Of course she is.
How's that not even a conflict of interest? Leo Varadkar, the woke head of Ireland, Emmanuel Macron, so many, Justin Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern, the former New Zealand Prime Minister. These are all World Economic Forum young leaders. And so none of them, the World Economic Forum, you can't vote them out. You can't even shareholder vote them out. It's like a private institution. It's a private club. But it really is the world's most dense gathering of VVIPs. I can't deny it. And so everyone wants to be there for whatever reason. And a lot of it's off the record. So it's off the record lobbying. You know, I bumped into the governor of Georgia, Governor Kemp, there on the street, if I'm remembering his name right. And I was sort of friendly to him. I got no beef with him. I said, how are you here at this woke George Soros? This is Soros's favorite place. I said, what are you doing here? Like, they don't believe in free speech. They're very woke. What would you say to the America First side of your party? And he said, I have nothing to say to you. He was getting into that. I was disappointed in his. He could have given a good answer. He could have said, I'm here to get jobs for my state. I'll go anywhere to get jobs. I'll talk to the devil himself. There could have been a good answer, but there's a snootiness, like, how dare you grubby people ask me questions. There was a young Japanese citizen journalist, Masako was her name, just a young lady who wanted to do journalism. She waited outside a restaurant for Klaus Schwab for hours. And he finally came out. And he saw her, and he came to her, and she said, may I ask you a question? And he said, what outlet are you with? And she said, I'm an independent journalist. And he said, no. And he walked away. Why? I mean, is her question not valid on its own? Does she need to pay you for you to pay any attention to her? So this is people who have no democratic standing, yet they want to be rulers. Klaus himself mused the other day that AI could do away with elections. He said that what do we even need elections for when artificial intelligence can tell us the solution? They talk about AI in courts. I've seen that idea bruited as well. These are the folks who tell you that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They have crazy philosopher madmen like Yuval Noah Harari.
Terrifying.
Who talks about people being useless and the future is video games and drugs. They're very dystopian, but they'll wind up on top.
Controlling the flow of information is the WEF's #1 priority, and stopping them is ours. I suggest you head over to the Rebel News website, the link is in the description, and check out their coverage of this year's WEF meeting in Davos. And personally, I'd like to thank Ezra, Avi, and the entire Rebel team for their outstanding public interest journalism. Now, here is the Aussie Wire News. I'm sure everyone has noticed that there is a cost of living crunch going on. How could you possibly miss it? It feels like the cost of everything is going up, and the cost of fuel is no exception. Someone who's trying to draw attention to the fact that actually a very significant proportion of the cost of fuel is in fact tax is David Limbrick MP from Victoria, a friend of the show. Welcome back, David.
Thanks for having me.
Look, this was actually brought back to my attention. Obviously, I'm aware that this is a thing, but you actually posted about this recently on social media, and I'm grateful that you did. You make a great point here. For every litre of petrol or diesel you put in your car, you pay almost 50 cents in excise tax and then pay GST on top of that. Obviously, that has cost of living implications. Do you think this is one of the things that the government ought to be doing in response to the cost of living crisis?
Well, if you cast your mind back to during the pandemic, the government actually cut excise tax in half for a limited period of time.
Yes.
We were pressuring them to try and make that permanent, but they didn't. But everyone knows that the cost of petrol feeds into your car when you fill it up, of course, and that affects your cost of living. But what a lot of people don't think about is especially the diesel and how that affects distribution, because people have been complaining about the cost of things at supermarkets. Well, one of the things that feeds into that cost is diesel, because every supermarket needs to truck stuff around, and that if that's more expensive, then that means the cost of goods are more expensive, and a large proportion of that is tax.
Well, I jumped onto the Parliamentary Budget Office's website to try and wrap my head a bit more around this issue and around this particular tax. You can download this report for yourself if you want to have a look at it. Now, I've grabbed a quote here. It's in very, very small writing. I didn't have a choice as to how it displayed on the screen. So let me just get this up for you. One moment. It's gone very small on my screen as well. There it is. Right, apologies for that. The excise and customs duty on petroleum fuel is one of the oldest taxes in Australia, applying since Federation in 1901. For some of that time, and this is the crucial bit, there has been a link between the amount of excise raised and road funding. The formal link to road funding most recently ceased in 1992. Since then, fuel tax has been a general revenue-raising tax with only a minor link with the Australian government's overall level of road funding. David, I think a lot of people would be quite surprised to discover that there actually isn't a direct link, that this is actually just general revenue.
Yeah, a lot of people have this idea that it's, there to set aside to build roads and maintain roads and all this sort of stuff. But as you point out, that was actually, I think it was found unconstitutional to have that revenue hypothecated. So it just goes into general revenue. And going forward, this is going to be a problem that I know the government's already thinking about, is if you have that idea that it's going to be funding roads, at least partially, then what happens with electric vehicles? Because, and this is something that the government's already thinking about, because they don't pay this excise tax at all.
And they can be very, very heavy vehicles that cause a considerable amount of damage to roads as well. Now, you mentioned the court case, the 1992 ruling that put an end to the hypothecation of this particular tax. There was also a court ruling around the constitutional validity of states charging their own fuel excise. It used to be that they had their own separate to the federal one. That was ended because it was found to be unconstitutional. I want to come back to the constitutionality in just 1 second. A quick fact here. This is $18.2 billion or 3.2% of total budget revenue. So this is a fairly high stakes issue here. Back to the issue of constitutionality. There is in our constitution a double taxation clause that you cannot be charged a tax on a tax. Now, we are being charged a tax on a tax in the form of the fuel excise being applied federally and then GST being charged on top of that. My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, is that courts have said that that's okay because they're not both taxes.
Well, whether or not a lawyer thinks it's a tax, I don't know. But I think it's a tax. It's a tax because, it's a tax. And it does seem crazy that it's double taxed as well, that you pay GST on top of it. Surely they could, maybe that's another thing they could do to ease cost of living, is make diesel and petrol GST free to make up for the fact that it's double taxed. Interestingly, this constitutional issue came up again recently in Victoria because Victoria in the last term of Parliament put in a new fee for electric vehicle users based on the net amount of kilometres that they drove, and this was challenged in court and found to be unconstitutional, and that tax got scrapped.
Yeah, well, back to the constitutionality of double taxation. You think that excise is a tax. I certainly think that excise is a tax. This is a direct screen grab from the Parliamentary Budget Office. They clearly think that fuel excise is a tax because they say, and I quote, "Fuel excise is a tax." That seems fairly clear cut to me. I find it very, very difficult.
If it's not a tax, what is it? I don't know what it is if it's not a tax.
Even the Parliamentary Budget Office is in furious agreement with both of us on this point, David. Now, excise is an interesting thing because it's often used as a form of punishment by governments. We see excise is applied to alcohol consumption on the basis that alcohol consumption leads to costs elsewhere, and so the government justifies it in that way and uses it to discourage people from drinking as much. Same with tobacco tax. It creates costs for our healthcare system, although as has been pointed out in the past, the tobacco excise raises multiple times more than the costs that can be attributed to it. So it's become a method by which governments are trying to nudge us. Do you think that's true of the fuel excise as well? In a net zero world where they're trying to move in that direction, is the excise now more about behaviour modification?
Oh, look, I think there's a lot of people on the left that would love it to go higher. I don't see anyone from the Greens calling for fuel excise to be lowered. In fact, I hear them complaining that farmers get a diesel rebate. One of the subsidies that they keep claiming is this diesel rebate, excise rebate, for miners and farmers, and it's effectively to make up for the fact that miners and farmers use a lot of diesel, but they actually don't use it on roads. They use it on tractors, on private land in mines and things like that. So, they want more tax.
Yeah, calling a tax refund a subsidy is stretching the English language beyond breaking point. You've just recently returned from some travels, and this particular post of yours, excuse me, made me quite angry. I'm going to be honest, David. I was pretty annoyed to see
alone.
this. So this is David Limbrick MP traveling and enjoying the finer things in life, saying exactly the same product imported from the United States. In Japan, it's about Australian $20. In Australia, it's about $50. Most of the cost in Australia is tax. Is that literally true, that more than half of a bottle of spirits could be tax?
Yes, it is. If you go and check you can calculate it yourself how much the tax is. They charge, it's close to $100 per litre that's per litre of pure alcohol. So if you've got Jack Daniels, which is 40% alcohol, you can calculate it, and yes, it's a lot of tax. And look, it's nuts. And I was the same as you. I thought it was funny at first when I was looking at liquor stores in Japan, but when I saw that bottle of Jack Daniels for $20, I'm scratching my head and saying, why is it so cheap in Japan? And yeah, it's just tax, basically.
Well, we're certainly being taxed out the wazoo. I've been saying for some years now, and I know that you're on the same page here, that many people mistakenly believe the most expensive thing that they pay for in their life is their house. In actual fact, the most expensive thing that you pay for every year is your government. And in a cost of living crisis, it strikes me that the government should be the one reducing how much it costs us in order to try and bring the cost of living under control. Well, David Limbrick MP, thank you so much for drawing this issue back to my attention, reminding me of it, and for helping to bring this story to our viewers here on the Aussie Wire. Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, illegal immigration is a problem around the world, according to some people. Other people would have you believe that there is no such thing as illegal immigration and no one is illegal. And most of us, well, we don't really know what to believe, and everywhere in the world is different and what's happening is different. But certainly nowhere in the world are we seeing immigration at the rates that we're seeing on the southern border of the United States. Joining me now to discuss this problem and some really interesting details within this particular challenge is our North America correspondent, Julie Hartman. Julie, thank you so much for joining us once again on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Julie, this challenge of the southern border of the United States, this is not a new thing. This has been a political football for decades. Trump promised to build the wall, said he was going to make Mexico pay for it. Parts of the wall have been built, but there are still massive gaps in there. And certainly since Joe Biden came to power, we've seen incredible numbers of people crossing that border. What's the situation right now? Is that ongoing? Are they taking steps to try and reduce those numbers? What's the situation right now?
Well, we really don't know the situation. It seems to kind of flip-flop almost on a weekly basis. When President Trump was then candidate Trump running for office in 2015, when he announced the whole plan for a border wall and that Mexico would pay for it, everyone in this country on the left freaked out, thought he was insane. And now what we are seeing is that so many immigrants, illegal immigrants, have crossed into our border that now those very same individuals who reacted so strongly back in 2015 are now some of the strongest proponents of actually building that border wall. So what has happened is that since President Biden took office 3 years ago in January of 2021, over 7 million undocumented immigrants have come across our southern border alone. 7 million. In fact, some people are estimating that it may be higher. It may be close to 10 million. But that 7 million number that I provided to you is not just a rumor that I heard. It's actually the data from the Department of Homeland Security. So that is government data.
Wow.
And so I think a lot of Americans are going, my gosh, who are these people coming across our border? Of course, many are seeking a better life. I have enormous sympathy for them. But could there perhaps be bad actors? And also, do we have the money and resources and infrastructure to support this influx?
Look, this is an issue that I feel very conflicted on. I'm a libertarian, and so I believe that the movement of human beings and human capital, if I can put it in economic terms, is just as important as the movement of goods to creating prosperity. But I do believe that incentives matter. What are the incentives right now in the US? I would argue, for example, that if there wasn't a welfare state, that you would be more likely to get people coming for the purpose of working hard and contributing, as opposed to if you have a big welfare state like what we do in Australia, a percentage of people will come to try and mooch off the taxpayer and mooch off the state. What are the incentives at play in America? Do people get an enormous amount of government support once they arrive?
Well, it certainly seems so. In New York City, we have seen that thousands of migrants which came to Manhattan actually got free stays, government subsidized stays in hotel rooms all around Manhattan. They got free meals, they got free clothing. In fact, the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, actually made an announcement urging churches and mosques and synagogues to provide room to house these migrants. And so I think there's a huge incentive, to your point, certainly the welfare state, but also the kind of extension of that, where we have many Democrat politicians saying that their cities are, quote, sanctuary cities, where no person is illegal. Every individual is welcome. And what we have seen happen is that many of those leaders of those quote unquote sanctuary cities, such as the aforementioned mayor of Manhattan, Eric Adams, have actually gone back and said, wait a minute, we are getting way too many people and our city cannot support this anymore. In fact, Mayor Adams said that illegal immigration was, quote, destroying the city. Talk about a 180. So I think people are realizing this incentive structure and trying now, it may be too late, to dismantle it.
It is quite remarkable to hear people like the mayor of New York saying the very same things that people in southern Texas and the southern parts of the border areas of the US have been saying for quite some time. You brought to my attention an article that I want to bring up on screen here now because this really gives some texture, some context. It's actually a remarkably good article from CNN of all places, but credit to the author of this article. I've read the whole thing. We'll make sure we put the link into the description of this video because I think it's well worth everyone's time going and reading this. Talk to us a little bit about this particular detail, that they're noticing a significant rise specifically in Chinese nationals coming across the southern border. Why is that?
Well, what we are seeing here through this article, and by the way, there have been many other newspapers, not just CNN or news publications, which have reported on this. What we're seeing is that there is a large influx of migrants, specifically from China. This article says that in the first, and again, I'm quoting from CNN, in the first 11 months of 2023, more than 31,000 Chinese citizens were picked up by law enforcement crossing illegally into the United States from Mexico. That number, 31,000 in the first 11 months of 2023, is more Chinese nationals coming into our border than the past 10 years combined. So this is really the concern of American citizens. There has been a very successful campaign launched by the left, which vilifies people who are anti-illegal immigration. They call us xenophobes. They call us bigots. They say that we are callous people who have no sympathy for the plight of others. That is totally untrue. I, as a conservative who loves the United States of America, understands better than anyone else why someone from a poverty-stricken, war-torn country would want to flee that situation and come to America to create a better life for themselves and their families. I totally get it. I would illegally cross the border if I were in such a position. But what we are seeing is that there's reason to believe that there are bad actors coming across our border. Are all of those 31,000 Chinese citizens bad actors? Of course not. But we have seen that China, as our number one adversary, has been very deft at trying to spy on us, establishing a spy base on Cuba, sending a spy balloon over the United States, bribing the Biden family to buy them off. And let me ask you this question. Do you think that they would shy away from this opportunity, knowing that our southern border is wide open, to send in spies? Of course they wouldn't. So this is the concern of the American people.
No, I tend to agree, but I would push back and wonder whether China as a nation state has the resources. They could just fly them in and have them skip their visa. It also strikes me, we saw with Cuba, we saw that Fidel Castro gladly allowed a number of Cubans out of Cuba to flee mostly to the US in order to reduce opposition to himself and in order to shore up his own grip on power within Cuba. And I have to wonder, to what degree would Xi Jinping perhaps be quite happy for those that are unhappy in China? Christians, for example, or people who aren't members of the party or are speaking out and want to have some political freedom. He might be quite happy to have them leave and go over the southern border of the United States, and he would just say, good riddance. It's not necessarily a given that this is being used as some sort of a military exercise on the part of the Chinese government.
It's certainly not a given, but I think what we also see, Topher, is that Xi Jinping is not the type to necessarily say, okay, to his enemies, why don't you leave China if you don't like it? We see his relentless persecution of Falun Gong members, which is that religious sect which the CCP has outlawed. They kill and actually harvest the organs of members of that group. We also see the massive, despicable Uyghur massacre of the Turkish Muslim minority in China. They're put in concentration camps, killed, and also their organs are harvested. So I think that, again, Xi Jinping, excuse me, is not exactly the type of guy to want to force out his enemies. He wants to relentlessly persecute them. But again, I hear your point. Not all of these individuals are bad actors. Again, I get more than anyone why people would want to come to the United States of America. But we are seeing time and time again that China is aggressive and relentless with their infiltration and spying campaign here in the United States. And I think there is great reason to believe that they would take advantage of this wide open opportunity to send in spies and bad actors into their adversary, our country.
It's certainly a possibility. I certainly can't say that it's not happening. That is for sure. Look, it's a difficult issue for me, and one that I just wish we could grab our politicians by the scruff of the neck and get them to fix the incentives so that we wouldn't have to control people in the way that a closed border controls in one way, an open border causes harms in another way. And if we could just fix the incentives, and I think a lot of these problems would fix themselves. But sadly, Julie, you don't run America, I don't run Australia, and we can't fix these problems by talking about them. But we do appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We'll put the link to that CNN article into the description of this video so that you can read that for yourself and understand a little bit more about what's happening there. And Julie Hartman, North America Correspondent, thank you once again for coming on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you so much.
Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we have a big international focus, especially now going into 2024 as we grow and we begin to expand our horizon around the world. Now, someone that I've been wanting to get on the Aussie Wire for quite some time is a man I had the pleasure of meeting in Sydney last year. He's from Japan. His name is Mr. Yuki Oikawa, and he brings us some big news out of Japan at the moment. Mr. Oikawa, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you very much. Topher, again, I really appreciate the last time we met in Sydney and you accepted the opportunity interviewing with you. And I posted your interview on my YouTube channel, which was very popular among Japanese listeners. Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful that you did, and I'm especially grateful that you've agreed to come on and bring us up to speed with some concerning developments in Japan. And I think it's worth bringing to the Aussie Wire audience, which is obviously mostly English speaking, but I think perspective is really important. And to understand that the fights that we're facing right now are unfortunately replicated in Japan. But the good news is, of course, so is the push back and the fight back. So would you please update us? What's happening in Japan with the World Health Organization, the pandemic treaty, and also with a very concerning amendment to your constitution? Take it away.
Okay. If I look back 1 year ago, the beginning of the last year, almost nobody realized that this issue in Japan. Actually, I was doing the YouTube activity in Japanese language, and I focused on this problem, and gradually the people got interest in this issue. However, the Japanese mainstream media always ignore this subject.
Yeah.
And in WHO, World Health Organization, the part of the United Nations, which must be good. So that is the Japanese people's mind. So the problem is the almost nobody got interest in this issue. And then I had a plan to set up the big convention to discuss this problem among the Japanese experts. So we had this convention in the last year, October in the city called Osaka. They're collecting over 1,300 people to join this event.
Wow.
So people realize, wow, what's happened? And we learned the basic knowledge of the pandemic treaty and amending the international health regulations of WHO. So, and also I share your experience, what's happened in Melbourne, with Japanese people. So people got more realistic and also dangerous the feeling through this convention. And then right after this convention, one of the lecturer in this convention he is the member of the parliament, Japanese parliament, and also the former minister of internal affairs of Japan. He's a great man. He's called Mr. Haraguchi. Mr. Haraguchi. He promised that I'm going to create the caucus and the parliament members caucus in Japanese parliament to discuss this issue, and he launched this caucus, special caucus, in Japanese parliament, and now we with many medical or scientific experts, and also including journalists like me, with the member of parliament, we discussed this issue. We just launched that activity.
Amazing.
However, and unfortunately, the Japanese government side is very positive to joining pandemic treaty.
Of course.
So that's our problem.
Yeah. Look, it's a problem that's replicated around the world. There is a minority of people within most countries around the world now. And obviously, based on what you're saying there, it's largely thanks to your work, and I applaud you for that there is a minority of people that are aware, but not enough yet. But the fact is, we've come from nowhere where almost no one was aware of this problem. And I certainly wasn't the first one to become aware of it in Australia. I'm aware of it thanks to the hard work of other people that brought it to people's attention. And I came across it and went, hang on, what's this thing? It's only thanks to their work that I know about it, and thanks to your work that people in Japan know about it. And increasingly, I think we can build our numbers and start to create pushback. But in Japan, unfortunately, based on what you've been communicating with me, and I so appreciate you reaching out, you've got another problem now with the Japanese government wanting to put emergency powers into the Japanese constitution, which, may I say, based on my personal experience, is very concerning.
Oh, that's a huge problem at the moment. And the many people worrying about that. We have a constitution, the Japan's constitution, which never been amended since the launch. This is one of the oldest national constitution in the world to be never changed.
Yeah.
That's why the Japanese politician, and especially the Japanese prime minister, would like to change the constitution, because that could be a history. The first man. So they want to be a first man to change Japanese constitution. And then the many prime minister, many politicians tried in the past. But now they focus on the national emergency article. So national emergency, it's easier for Japanese people to accept. Oh, the emergency, that's okay. So we always obey government. So that is the kind of a traditional Japanese people's the way of thinking. However, the Japanese people are not aware of how dangerous it is. So we're going to start the new parliament end of this month, January, and Japanese Prime Minister Mr. Kishida is now preparing the proposal, how change and how to include the emergency clause into the constitution.
Can I ask?
And our side.
Sorry, do you know roughly when that vote is likely to happen? Is it going to take another year before it becomes a more fundamental question, because I don't know how the Japanese system works. When you change your constitution, does that have to go to a referendum? Do people vote on that, or is it a parliament vote?
You're right. We need a national people's referendum.
Right. And so when is that likely to happen?
After Parliament decided.
Right. So it could be this year. It could be in 2024.
That we don't know.
Don't know. Yeah,
could be next year. They need to provide the time for Japanese people to understand and decide.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe next year.
Well, Mr. Oikawa, I know that you're going to be working very hard to help the Japanese people understand what's at stake here. And if there's anything that I can do and anything that the Aussie Wire can do to help you to be able to communicate that to your people, then consider us to be very willing to help in any way, however small it may be. And if I can get across to Japan this year, especially with you've very kindly got your team translating my book, Good People Break Bad Laws, into Japanese, and I do hope to be able to come to Japan to be able to launch that over there. And maybe that might be an opportunity to help the Japanese people understand what's at stake here. But for now, Mr. Oikawa, thank you so much for bringing us this news. It's not happy news, but it is nonetheless encouraging to know that there are people fighting back all over the world. There are people waking up all over the world. Mr. Oikawa, thank you so much for coming on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you, Topher.
Thank you for watching the Aussie Wire News. We release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. You can catch up on past episodes and read our incredible blogs at the website, which is theaussiewire.com. Follow us on all of our socials at the Aussie Wire, and please become an insider. That's a financial supporter of the Aussie Wire, and you can do that at the link that is in the description of this video. Thank you so much for watching. This is the Aussie Wire. I'm Topher Field.